Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's 49er Industry Chat. I'm just going to give it a couple seconds to allow everyone to enter the Zoom webinar today. All right, well, welcome everyone, and thank you again for joining us for this edition of our 49er Industry Chat. My name is Alana Tell-Oren. I'm the Alumni Outreach Specialist here at Cal State Long Beach. And just to remind you, this session is being recorded and will live on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. And if you have any questions for our host, please enter them in the Q&A box. And it's now my pleasure to introduce today's chat host, Bill Beverley. So I'm just going to read his bio here for you all. Bill Beverley brings 15 years of experience in power distribution and specific expertise in vehicle electrification and batteries. Early in his career, Bill was a technical project lead at Moog Aerospace, serving aircraft manufacturers such as Boeing, Airbus, and Gulfstream. After moving into automotive, he has held leadership positions at electric automotive startups, OEMs such as Indi-EV, Romeo Power, and Faraday Future. He holds 5 technology patents in the electric automotive technology space. Since Evolectric's founding in 2019, Bill leads all technical programs and provides subject matter expertise across all facets of electric drive systems, including battery, powertrain, and electrical systems. Bill has a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering from Cal State Long Beach. He's an active member of the Society of Automotive Engineers and an active alumnus of the Delta Chi Fraternity. Bill and team are committed to growing CSULB and becoming an electrification powerhouse by working closely with the College of Engineering as an industry partner for their recent 2022 California Energy Commission grant award in zero emissions vehicle workforce training. Please join me in welcoming today's 49er Industry Chat host, Bill Beverley.
All right, thank you, Alana. Thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity to chat.
Of course, yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here today, and definitely looking forward to getting into your time at Cal State Long Beach and your career path after that as well. And again, if you have any questions for Bill, please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A also. So we definitely like to start from the beginning. So what was it that made you interested in mechanical engineering as kind of a young adult, and what made you kind of choose Cal State Long Beach also? What were some other interests that you had going on during that time as well?
Yeah, great question. I came from a family of a lot of blue collar individuals who'd worked and supported the local infrastructure of aerospace, Boeing, Douglas, things like that. It had always been an up and coming industry here in the local LA area, even down in Orange County. So being born and raised in Garden Grove, California, I was surrounded by the opportunity. My family was fully into it. I was sort of in denial for a while, saying that I should really kind of dive into the mechanical engineering journey, so to speak. Short story, I actually went to Long Beach State because my father went there 2 times, actually back in the 70s and then again in the early 90s. And also because my guidance counselor in high school went there and they had very good things to recommend. But also because at the time I was studying in high school, I was really active in theater. And Long Beach State has a very good theater arts department, and that's how I got into Long Beach State. I was a theater major for a year and a half, and then after about a year and a half, I couldn't deny my heritage anymore. My family was very curious about my next steps. They were very supportive of my journey in theater arts, but I had an inflection point at that point. And I discussed with my father what the next steps in my life would be. And it kind of circled back to the things I've been ignoring, which is mechanical engineering is something that I'd always been sort of accomplishing in my scholastic journey, right? And being very good at math, so to speak, and the different sciences. So at that point, talked with my dad, and literally over a coin flip, it was either going to be heads or tails, right? Over a coin flip, it was heads, and it was mechanical engineering. The inverse would have been chemistry, which isn't a bad decision either. But after that, I got into it, and I just dug in. I was emotionally invested, and I was ready to go and do the work. So it became a very logical and thankfully successful choice for me.
That's awesome. And you opted to, were you considering doing like a theater minor or anything like that, or you just kind of wanted to focus on the engineering?
I really considered a theater minor. They're on two different parts of the campus, so it was already logistically difficult to be in two places at the same time. It was also incredibly difficult. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to manage a full-time engineering program, right? It's a lot of challenge, a lot of extra hours, and I was playing catch up. After a year and a half as a theater major, I had to start over. So those dreams were quickly put to bed when I realized if I'm going to commit, I got to commit 100%, and I did.
Yeah, well, I mean, look where it's gotten you now. So, it seems like you made the right decision.
I hope so. Yeah, it feels pretty good. So.
Like, I hope so. But while you're at Cal State Long Beach, were you involved in any kind of clubs or orgs, or were there any particular professors in your department that really helped kind of shape your experience here?
Yeah, actually, I dove in, 100%. Long Beach, the campus at Long Beach State is just so beautiful, so diverse. I came from a high school that was very small. We had a graduating class of about 250 people. So to see such diversity and just an ecosystem of new humans I'd never even seen in my life, right? I dove in and said, I want to participate in this place. I'm going to spend equal amounts of time here as I am at home. Might as well dive in, right? So I rushed and joined a fraternity, as you mentioned, in the bio Delta Chi Fraternity. Proud member, still contributing back as much as I can as an alumnus. And that really got me plugged in at a core because Delta Chi was really focused on strong academics, strong extracurricular activities, and really giving back through philanthropy. So that opened up a lot of the areas that I could explore on my own accord. So having said that, I joined NSCS, National Society of Collegiate Scholars. I joined Golden Key Honor Society, the Order of Omega, and I kind of just diversified myself and plugged in. As well as obviously participating in a lot of the philanthropies and events that we had through Delta Chi. So I was basically living on campus for the most part. It became such an interesting thing for me to be a part of that I actually moved into the fraternity house, spent all my time on campus, and then the rest of the time at the house. And because I was on campus so much, to your second point of your question, there were some very influential professors that really kind of steered my journey, home, so to speak, in the mechanical engineering group. And I do want to give some shout outs to them. I mean, Dr. Esfandiari, Ramin Esfandiari, wonderful human being. One of the reasons why I really pushed so strongly in my controls and deeper learning and understanding of some of the higher order engineering principles was because Dr. Esfandiari was so accommodating, open door policy. He was entertaining in class. He had a lot of really great ways to present really complex, ideas. And then in the same vein, Dr. Mary Young, and both are still actively involved in the alumni or the professor group, and happen to want to give back and work with them a little closely in the future if possible. But Dr. Mary Young and Dr. Esfandiari were really pivotal in keeping my interest and giving me a nice application focus on the things that engineering was teaching me, which is something that you don't quite see a lot. I mean, to be honest, in academics, you don't necessarily know exactly where it's going to lead to in the workplace, but they made it very clear and very motivating to go and do the work.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. And that's great that you got to also have that experience, that social side, and being part of the fraternity and living in the house too. I feel like not a lot of Cal State Long Beach students get to actually live in those houses and have that side as well. And that's great that you had these professors really inspiring you along the way. So while you were in school and everything, were you also working at the same time, or were you kind of just focused on school? How did you start the process of kind of entering the workforce toward the end of your studies?
Yeah, great question. I guess I like pain because I changed my mind, to go from something artistic to something science. And while doing that, I was also providing guitar lessons to children from ages of 3 to about, actually my oldest was 26. And I had done that for about 3 years. And once I shifted from theater to engineering, I realized I needed to start getting plugged in, get an internship as soon as possible. The value of having an internship in your undergrad is immense. I encourage everybody, anybody who's not an alumni, it's in their undergraduate activity right now, you need to do that. So I understood that very quickly, and I met a gentleman that was in my physics class who needed some help in physics. And so I made a slight exchange with him. I said, "Are you interning anywhere?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm interning at Boeing at Long Beach." And I said, I'll help you pass your physics class if you help me get an internship. And he
Oh,
realized, he's like, you don't have any engineering background. This is your first semester as an engineering understudy or the undergrad. And I said, yeah, but you need to help me and I can get in. And he did, long story short, and I helped him pass. So I interned at Boeing for 2.5 years at C-17 operations in Long Beach. Learned a tremendous amount of skill sets. Great team that was there. C-17 is no longer around, but that facility is, and they've downsized. It's now the hangar at LBX, for example. That was my first
yeah.
internship over there. The
Okay.
building's gone, but I go with my kids all the time to eat on that same floor ground.
Yeah.
But 2.5 years there, and then I transitioned at the end of my time there to Moog, and actually interned there as a CAD specialist. And then right before I graduated, they handed me a letter saying they would like me to come on full time. And it was an offer before I'd even gotten my degree. It was contingent on a degree, of course, but again, circling back, the value of that internship was immense because while I finished up the due diligence of getting my undergrad, the industry was already ready for me to join. So I fully endorse that and appreciate that.
Wow, that's awesome. And that's very smooth, like how that all just kind of worked out, and the universe just kind of came together and was like, we're just gonna make you an offer before you graduate. That's great. And so you worked for Moog for a few years, right? And then what made you, and that's in like the aerospace world, what made you decide to like kind of switch over to automotive? And what were kind of like your passions behind that?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I never grew up as an automotive guy or an aerospace guy. I was always a sort of an Imagineer, right? Just trying to figure out what kind of cool things could be made. So working with Moog was awesome. They have a world-class team there. I worked with Moog for just short of 10 years. And I've been given the opportunity to change my title many times through the different projects I was on, and and go through that system structure of just growing in my experience set. I had just finished up a 2.5 year project working as technical program lead on A350 aircraft program, which is basically Airbus's program. They're flying around now, but it was headquartered in Germany, in a city called Bremen, in the north of Bremen. So my wife and I just married. I remember texting her, "Hey, do you want to move to Germany?" And she's like, "Yes." So we did.
Wow.
And 2.5 years later, I felt like I'd accomplished the world, so to speak. So I asked Moog if I could join corporate because I was ready to go, right? I was ready to keep going and evolve. They said, "We like what you're doing. We're just a little too ahead of the game here. So stick around for about 5 years and we'll figure it out." And I was like, "Well, that's okay. I appreciate that. I'm humbled by that." But it was also my appetite was voracious at that point for challenge, right? So I had gone down the street to a company that had just founded, not even 9 months before. That's I think is pretty well known by now, but Faraday Future. And that company was an offshoot. Essentially, a lot of people from Tesla at the time were looking to make another Tesla. And they had headquartered in Gardena. And I gave it a shot. I said, let's go through the interview process. They wanted to interview me as a battery engineer. I had no battery experience before that, but I had the fundamentals of system and aerospace design and products in the air after about 10 years. They took a chance on me. They brought me in. They re-baselined my position as more of a generalist engineer, serving many different groups within the organization. And then that, the ability for me to work on gearboxes and powertrains and power distribution, it's the same fundamentals between aerospace and automotive, just applied to a different type of vehicle. And they were open to that, right? So in a few short years, I was able to become, one of the team members of the founding group of their motorsports team. And then the rest is history. From automotive, from then on, I've been in EV automotive. So it's been a real blessing to have made that decided change. And maybe it was a blessing that Moog said, "Hey, you're moving a little too fast for us." One can only imagine. So.
Right, great. And let's see, I know we're getting a few questions in the chat. One of them is about you have 5 technology patents. What is that process like? The R&D leading up, and then the application to achieve the patent and everything.
Yeah. So I might not be the best person to ask about that, because one of the blessings that Faraday brought forth was Faraday had an entire team dedicated to hunting and accumulating IP. So I essentially, the short form, maybe 30-second answer is I put together a lot of studies, a lot of analysis on paper on how these patent technologies would work and function, and a lot of the actual physics behind it, and some of the systems and bills of materials, things like that. And then the IP team came in and said, okay, what's the general fundamental need that you're looking to cover here? What's the art of the possible? And then they took that away and they wrote a very deep patent through the process. It went through a couple of different rungs of validation internally, and then it was submitted. And then about a year later, I was told that I was awarded 5 out of the 7 patents that I applied for, and that was it. So they made it pretty turnkey. It's not usually the case. I think each patent's like 15 to 20,000 each, but I saw none of that.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's good. And then, so I know you have this presentation for your current company, Evolectric. Do you want to share that? And you can share a bit about what made you choose to kind of co-found this new company and what that looked like starting from kind of the ground up into where it is today.
Sure. I'd be happy to.
Sure.
So, let me know when you can see it full screen.
Perfect. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about my background here. I founded a company called Evolectric. That's what I'm co-CTO or co-CEO and CTO of today, co-founder. Essentially, it kind of, it's my co-founder and I's baby, if you will, right? I mean, when you found a company, it becomes, especially your first one, it becomes sort of your baby, and it becomes all about what you as a person are able to generate through your learnings. So I think it's important to always kind of harken back to the history of myself and my co-founder, how we started, how we brought it in. So it's just kind of a reminder of sort of that journey. It was totally nonlinear. Through aerospace, starting again, intern at Boeing, going through Moog, serving a bunch of customers that had diverse requirements and diverse expectations, and then eventually making my way into electric vehicles. And the same kind of thing happened where, although it was a different product, we're still able to work with, like-minded companies that were just trying to push a product forward and really move the needle on getting that product into the hands of their consumer with high value. So those two things, really unified my idea of what a company needs to represent in terms of really bringing value to the end customer and the end consumer at the end of the day. I wouldn't be anything if I didn't talk about, how I'm a generalist. Again, as a theater major, I'm not the expert in the corner of the room. I am the person that likes to do the things that do not like to be done. I'm the person that enables, and I would be nothing again without deferring to the excellence of the team that we put together. That you see briefly on the board here. And then on the top right corner is a picture of one of our first assets that we actually have in operation that we were able to demonstrate to former Governor Gray Davis. So it was pretty amazing there. And essentially what we do in a couple of slides, I don't really want this to be too much about the company, but again, it is about, what I've observed over my journey and what it really can mean in this new sector is our company develops and deploys modular software and hardware that can make any vehicle electric. So for what we're doing as our company, we're starting with an old vehicle or a new vehicle. Right now, we're focusing predominantly on old vehicles, mostly trucks like the one you're seeing here. We convert them from diesel or internal combustion engine. We rip all that stuff out and replace that componentry with new electric vehicle technology. So batteries, electric motors, all the components that make it road capable, that's what we do in-house. And so very simply, a couple of widgets here, it's a huge market. The value of electrification across the world, if it's not immediately known by the viewers here, by yourself, Alana, I mean, there's so much money committed towards making this the next step in our mission control journey. The market is significant. So we have to apply a modular technology basis, again, understanding the systemification of how technology can bring a benefit at the end of the day to the consumer. You have to be flexible with the things that are happening. I mean, not even a year and a half ago, you'd look out over the coast and you'd see a bunch of cargo ships just sitting there waiting to deliver. That, if you're not a nimble company, you're crippled by that, right? So modular technology is important to us. Target customer, like we said, small, medium business fleet owners, independent ones as well, because that's the backbone of the industry, the ones that are really doing a lot of the haul and movements of goods and services, so to speak. And then we have to bring the ecosystem with us. You can't just sit there and say, we're going to introduce these trucks, go buy them. We actually have to get people to buy into the idea and make it easier and easier for them to transition. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we do. But generally, with the time we have here, I do want to take a minute or two and just kind of say there's a lot of value in this technology space. When we talk about electrification and mobility, this is kind of what we're talking about on the screen. Like everything that you can dream of and you use in commonplace can be electrified with the right approach, right? And it has a better efficiency for certain applications than gas and diesel would. So it's a huge space of territory to be able to tackle. And there are tons of jobs being created now to be able to get there. Specifically, if someone asks, what are the careers? Well, if we just look at some of the automotive sector, you can look at these 4 sectors, by example, and say, there's vehicle design and production. We're talking about new vehicle design. We're talking about testing, for example, just creating that next product. And then down on the bottom left, infrastructure support. Again, you can't just imagine it and have it show up. We actually need support from private infrastructure to create the receiving ends of that equation. A lot of that, a lot of the charging, for example, a lot of the business side needs to be created. And then hardware design. What goes into the vehicles? Well, systems and controls, batteries, power electronics, things like that. And then standardization and policies through governments. We need a lot of buy-in from the governments and regulatory authorities like SAE, for example, the Society of Automotive Engineering, to be able to govern how all of these companies are getting into this space. So it's a tremendous space for people, technical or non-technical, to really get involved in and really proliferate that technology to the next level of maturity. And then finally, just kind of to share a little bit about what Evo is trying to do here. We have a very strong culture of supporting local industry growth, and we've been very intentional about headquartering in Long Beach and working with Cal State Long Beach out of pride and out of humility of what Long Beach has done for me and some of the team that's also alumni of the organization. And so what we did is back in 2019, we started with some white papers, general consulting. We're not afraid to educate and provide benefit to the general ecosystem, because we need that recursive model to come back, feed us to be successful. But we also said, let's make sure that we grow holistically here in that greater LA area and in Long Beach. So we were able to join, a couple of accelerators. We were one of the first cohorts of the Long Beach Accelerator. We have strong partnerships with the Economic Development Group. Endorsement from the mayor's office, who's also a fraternity brother of mine, a former fraternity brother. Great man, Dr. Garcia, Dr. Mayor Garcia. And then also Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. There's a ton of technical or technology baseline accelerators and incubators in LA. But all that kind of leads to our now and future efforts with Long Beach directly, which is, as we mentioned in the bio, Cal State Long Beach Department of Engineering won a California Energy Commission grant to be able to create and promote a zero emissions vehicles workforce, which we want to support. We are supporting. We're helping build that with Dr. Ginny Rhee, Dean Ginny Rhee. And then also going forward, we want to continue to expand that support and then get even deeper into potential collaboration with Long Beach City College, trade schools, and then move into Latin America as well. And so we're very intentional about making sure that we're clear and present about where that talent is coming from and helping that talent get to the next level of educational resource so it can be beneficial to the industry. That's kind of it from the slides I wanted to share, so I appreciate that. So go ahead and stop sharing there. But
awesome. Thanks so much for that presentation, Bill. And we do have some questions from the audience too, so I'll just fire some of those away. Sure. So where do you feel is the best opportunity now? Electrification of passenger cars or commercial vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit biased because I started a company that's doing it for commercial vehicles.
Yeah.
I believe there's opportunity in both sides, though. The passenger vehicles are no shortage of being saturated. There's a lot of vehicles coming out. There's a lot of work to do. So there's still tremendous potential there. But there's a secondary potential in commercial vehicles, which is why we've started now. We want to make sure that in the 5 years after we've started, we are at the bottom of that hockey stick. And when that hockey stick turns into rapid demand, rather than waiting for that technology to exist, we're one of the first players at that at the supply front. So I would say both are equally advantageous. I would say that it might be easier by a numbers game to get into the passenger vehicle space, but in my eyes, either one is doing the right thing. So.
Great, thank you. And also, let's see. Oh, this was a fun one. What was the coolest car you retrofitted with EV tech?
Yeah, that's a great one. Aston Martin Vantage. It's the most expensive car I've ever taken a Dremel to. I took a small Dremel and I cut the grill, and I was sweating the entire time because it's a very expensive car. But we put a system in there that was very competitive. I can't exactly say what we were going to go with it, but we were going to break some records with it, right? So we got it pretty far, and yeah, the rest you'll have to do some serious Google searching for. But that was probably the most fun one.
Yeah, awesome. And what's the lifespan of a retrofitted truck?
Very good question. So we're guaranteeing between 15 and 20 years. Really, it comes down to the battery systems in our vehicles. Those are the first things that wear, if you will, right? The rest of the things are maintainable: wheels, brake systems, things like that. Things you normally change on your regular vehicle. So I would say the industry standard right now, what we're seeing is between 7 and 10 years. So we're really trying to push the envelope to the next level because we're already battery experts. But yeah, that's what you're seeing.
Okay. Let's see. And can you speak to some of the larger industry trends you've observed over your 15+ year career in vehicle electrification?
Yeah, I would say, generally speaking, from an aerospace perspective, again, we worked in distributed flap controls or flap systems. So everything on the airplane that guides your basically on the large airplanes that guides your landing profile, all the flap systems. The general trends there that we're observing is due to a culmination of environmental safety issues in terms of like what kinds of materials you use that are good for the environment and whether they have any kind of risk to people in general. Materials we're really talking about, and also due to cost. A lot of the aerospace companies are starting to look at electromechanical systems. So a good example is to look at a bunch of these eVTOL aircraft that, you have an aircraft that has a bunch of propellers on it and systems that they can take off vertically and keep moving horizontally. That's what eVTOL stands for. So in aerospace, you're starting to see a trend of electrification come out. And then also a lot of hydrogen being talked about in aerospace. In the automotive sector, you're seeing a lot of electrification around, obviously, passenger vehicles, commercial trucks, and also a discussion around where hydrogen really fits in. In my opinion, hydrogen really fits in well on the heavy duty things like airplanes, trains, big trucks, right? So that's kind of the sort of a holistic view and my general idea there. What I've seen in batteries in the last 10 years is they've gotten hugely better. I mean, I don't know if those two words make sense together, but they've gotten vastly improved since the first ones I was able to see. They're getting much and much safer than they were in their first generation. So I'm excited to see where in the next 10 years battery systems are going to go from the energy they have, and also from people not having to worry about safety. It's really getting astronomically better every year. So.
Right, and there's a question that's kind of follows up to that too, from the audience. I'm all for electrification, but somewhat concerned about the waste or of the non-recyclable components of the batteries. Can you touch on that? Do the batteries or components go to landfills? Great
question. That's awesome. So we have to kind of look back at lead acid, where lead acid is over 90% recyclable these days, and it took many years to get there, right? But every lead acid battery, what's already in your car today, in your starter battery, for example, that battery is recyclable. It is continuously recycled. Companies are already being started right now to be able to get there for lithium-based batteries. There are some battery companies, recycling companies that we're good friends with, that take that material, they grind it up into its constituents. It's a volatile process that involves fire, right? But they actually get down to the powder elements of the materials internally, and then they're able to put those powder materials back to the organizations to sell as powdered nickel or powdered lithium, things like that. So it's going to take a while to get there. Currently, to address the question very specifically, a lot of them go to nowhere land or to landfills, right? A lot of organizations, big OEMs, whatnot, they'll take the batteries out of the vehicles and they actually sell them to a third party who just gets rid of them, who just finds a new home for them. And that third party is one or two things. They hoard that battery because they understand there's value still in that battery to be utilized in maybe a retrofit, like what we're doing, or to be used in stationary storage, like big boxes that just have a bunch of batteries that provide peak shaving capabilities for the grid. Or some of them, usually the ones that don't have a forward plan on what they're getting, they might actually throw them away and they totally lose the value of what's in that battery. But my stance and the stance of the organization is that there is value in that first life battery. Keep them out of landfills. At the very least, if you can't find a second home for them in something that's not a car, then find a way to recycle them down to their constituents. And talk to me if you need any help with partners with that.
Wow, great. Thank you for that answer. Let's see, we had one again about batteries. Because batteries have a finite energy capacity and must be recharged on a periodic basis, what conversation and partnerships exist to explore how best to protect the power grid? Is that a concern?
Yeah, that's a great question. So where my mind goes in that is a couple different things, right? Yes, it's a fact that the batteries require recharge. A lot of what we're trying to do is on the grid side, which Evolectric's not really a focus of, but previous company we were looking at that. Grid side is very much low risk, and they want to make sure that they're actually getting the power performance they need to serve the direct customer, right? Which is us, the ratepayer. So there are partnerships around the grid side communities to look at ways to best appropriate when that charge occurs and when the discharge occurs. A very easy example is to look at solar systems plus storage, right? Solar generates a bunch of power, but if that power doesn't have a place to go, it's wasted. It just gets dumped into the grid. So storage is a great way to say, all right, let's put that power here now so we can distribute it later when that cost is potentially higher. And also be able to, actually localize the value of what we're getting from our solar system or our wind farms, for example. So the kinds of partnerships we really need are multi-level. They're first and foremost on the grid side, utility. Utilities have to play. If they don't play along, you're not going to get access to the generation. Municipalities are another level where they're kind of middlemen, so to speak, in being able to introduce the downstream consumer and the utility. And then also technology providers, the ones that are providing the batteries and the systems, they have to be innovative enough to make those batteries stable, safe, but also long life. To that point, to that question, which is how do we recognize that they're going to be vacillated a lot? There's only a finite amount of time you can put, and the short answer is you have to oversize some of those systems just to get to that, minimum 10 years of performance you need. So, but that's changing on a day-to-day basis. Like in a couple of years, you might have smaller batteries that do the same thing that batteries 2 years ago did. So,
yeah, okay. So at the higher operating voltages experienced in electric vehicles, are there any concerns with battery pack over voltage? What battery management and control systems are in place?
This is awesome. I love these questions. These are wonderful. So yeah, very good point. So our philosophy is, generally speaking, more voltage better, because it means for the same power that you're trying to push a vehicle through the wind, so to speak, the same motive power. And if you convert that to electrical, with higher voltage, it requires lower current in your system. Lower current in your system means you're generating less heat, right? So generally speaking, if you can get higher voltage out of it, the better. But to the point of this question, higher voltage is increasing the risk of damage to a human or to somebody else or something else immensely, right? There are isolation checks and fault checks and tests that need to be done at voltages any higher than, according to OSHA, anything higher than 60 is lethal to a human being. Most vehicles on the road right now are averaging around 350 volts. We're looking at systems from 350 north to 600 volts. So the kinds of things that we have to demand of our battery management systems to be able to monitor the over voltage concerns that are brought up, for example, are how can we detect those over voltages and how can we pull out the batteries that are actually causing those. Usually it comes from internally when one of the battery cells decides to go a little awry, which is a very random occurrence. So how do you protect the rest of the batteries from seeing the consequence of that and then balancing themselves? On the other side, most of it is handled from the grid. It's coming to you in one of the three different areas that we're used to getting anyway, which is level 1, which is 110 through a wall, for example, 220, which is the stuff you get at like charging stations or a dryer plug, for example. And then the other one is 3-phase or single phase or 3-phase 480 power that comes directly from the grid. So those get regulated by a midterm inverter or some sort of voltage transformer. So when they get to the vehicle level, there's a negotiation that goes on that hopefully before you initiate any charge, you don't actually see two different voltages occurring, at that connection. Otherwise, they do what's called an arc. And you've seen an arc. You've probably seen those physics tests where the physics professor has a ball and they touch the ball and all the lightning bolts go across. Those are arcs. They're very dangerous. So there's usually checks at that level too, at the connection mechanism, that say, hey, am I near the same voltage before I start letting any current flow? If not, something's going to fault here. Something's going to get damaged. So there's a lot of systemic checks, both at a battery level and at a vehicle level, to make sure that you're speaking the language, you're at the same voltage potential.
Well, thanks for explaining that. Yeah. So kind of going back to like you co-founding Evolectric and everything, how did you know that you were ready to co-found a company, and how did you kind of like, what was the start of that looking like, and how did you kind of scale that internationally?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Didn't really know I was ready. I guess you're never really ready, right? At some point, again, I'll harken to an earlier comment. I guess I like pain. Anytime I feel stagnant, I feel like it's time to refresh and re-engage in what life throws your way. So after a couple of startups, and none of them are failures, every one of them has been a learning opportunity. They're still all in existence today, the ones I've been part of, knock on wood. And they're all pushing to do great things. But everything was a learning experience for me. And I humbled up to figure out, like, what are we not doing? Where is a general need not being met in our local backyard, but also, part of what we're doing as an organization is trying to go to Latin America and bring the benefits of electrification that are all over TV, all over the roads, down to communities that don't have access to that stuff and are perfect places to get that kind of technology. So I guess the best way to answer that is, at some point between myself and my co-founder, we had a crisis of conviction, right? And the things that we were doing, the money we were taking home, is part of the ecosystem of working, right? Everybody has to do it to survive. But what is that doing for the benefit of our lives? And are we really satisfied at the end of the day with how that money is playing a strong part in bringing value to our core, right? And the ethos of what we wanted to represent. At the end of the day, if I were to pass away tomorrow and I had a mountain of money, I wouldn't feel good about it, right? So we sat together and we said, we have to do something. Let's give it a shot. The worst case thing that can happen is that we fail. But we fail, we still learn, right? And we're even more valuable to the next job that we clock in and clock out to. And we're never leaving this electrification ecosystem. So the best time to fail is right now, when the whole world has shifted gears, especially when you're talking about electrification. They've shifted gears to say, this is coming, there's billions of dollars. And that conviction is really what got us to say, you know what, in 2019, let's do this. Let's leave our paying jobs and let's understand that we might not get paid for about a year until we have something to show for it. And, that was the scariest part. And it still is scary every now and then. It has a big, it's roller coaster wins and falls, but I've never been happier in my career. I've never been more convicted on what the value I'm doing is to people, to general humans and human behavior. So I absolutely don't regret it.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great to hear. And so what is like a typical work day look like for you? Like you head into the office, and what happens?
Yeah, that's funny. Typical work day. It's all over the place. There's no real set hours, kind of on the clock all the time. We have customers in Latin America, which is usually on the same general time frame as us, but we also have suppliers in China, suppliers in Europe. So my phone is always on. My family is aware of that. I think they accept it. But I guess the most typical standard day, if nothing's really going on of significant note, I'll get up, I'll spend some concerted time with my kids and my wife for breakfast. We'll have a good conversation about what the goals are for the week, and just kind of engage and be present. Then I head into the office, which thankfully right now at our stage is about 5 minutes away from my house. I guess that could be good or bad, right? I mean, it's always there. So, I drive over to the office. I go through, check my email to make sure that I'm abreast of the situation, whatever's going on. I'm one of those people that has to have a zero inbox, right? And I do it. And then I prep for the day, right? A little bit of sort of mental preparedness, a little bit of sort of mental time for myself, just learning and practicing sort of mantras of being able to get through challenges, but also successes with humility. And then the day starts around, 10 o'clock or so is when things really start coming across. Emails come in hot, customers want to know kind of generally where progress is on things. So it becomes more of a firefighting effort where you're going in, you're getting dynamic, right? You have to jump into a call to steer a conversation in a way that was maybe not intended. It went in the wrong direction. It's like, no, actually, we want to do this. And then after that call, I'm already looking at my calendar and realizing I booked time to do a simulation of a truck in a customer operation. So I have to sit down, put on my head cans with my music on, and for an hour and a half, nobody can bother me because I'm doing a simulation effort, right? And then after that, I realize I blew through lunch and I have to stuff some food in my face. I go downstairs and I start working on the truck. We have a truck, our first embodiment out here that's always our engineering asset. We start working on that, looking at that, working with the team to figure out what improvements are being made, what kind of trials that we're working through. Then by the end of the day, China signs on and we start having the discussions about strategic supply and some of the components and some of the economics and idiosyncrasies of what's going on globally. That it potentially impacts what we're going to get our hands on and when and the price for it. So it's and then by about 8 p.m. I start writing some grant stuff because we're always looking for grants. And then by about 9:30 I go home. My kids are just about ready to fall asleep. Give them a kiss on the head. Spend some time with my wife. Go to sleep and start it all over again. But that might sound exhausting, but it's getting all parts of me. It's actually thrilling every single day. So
yeah, those are crazy long days, but it sounds like you have so much passion for what you do and really thrive on this, wearing multiple hats and being in that fast-paced environment. It reminds me of that. I don't know if you've seen that meme that's going around like, you'll have to work in a fast-paced environment, and it's like a photo of the environment and it's just a cubicle.
Yeah. We have no walls in our facility.
That's great.
Yeah.
Made me think of that, but that's awesome. And let's see, a couple more questions here. What qualities or soft skills do you look for in your team and trust with your brand and products?
Yeah, really appreciate that question. So for me, maybe it comes from my theater background, but for me, the most important thing is the truthfulness in how a person presents themselves and being open to communication. And humility is a really big thing for me, right? Even so much so I stress myself out trying to be humble to the point where people don't believe that I can do it because I defer too much, right? But that's something I'm working on. I am confident I can do things, but I depend on people. So in that process, people come in, and if they want to join the mission, I have to understand that they're really invested at a personal level to doing things outside of their own interests, right? We stand for bigger things. That's the first piece. The second thing is actually assessing their technical skill set, which is not the question. Of course, it's more about soft skills. But if a person can come across as an effective communicator, there's always room for improvement for everybody. I'm not asking that they have tip-top skill sets, but if they're an effective communicator, if they take the ability to kind of pause and gather their thoughts, right? Interviews are tough. They're always tough. They're really tough at other organizations as well. But if an interview stumps somebody, I'm really impressed if that person can pause and say, you know what? I have the interest to figure out how I can do this better. I'm going to need some time to think about it. Would you allow me to come back with an answer over email in 24 hours? The decision to hire that person still is not really linked to that, but that kind of effort, that kind of thought process to be like, I am very interested in fixing, or finding the solution, and it's going to bother me because I believe it's something that we have to do together. Like those are the soft skills I like. People being able to think a bit outwardly and at that next level, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. Just I know we're kind of coming up against time here, so just like kind of a wrapping up here, now that you've gone automotive, it doesn't really sound like it to me, but do you see yourself kind of going back at all? What do the next 15 years kind of look like for you?
Good question. I haven't really thought too much about going back or not.
Yeah.
I'm super interested in the challenges that are out there, especially in mobility. I still pay attention quite often to electric vehicles in that space as well, helicopters and airplanes being electrified. I think they have a long way to go, but it's, for me as an engineer, it's physics, right? There's an object trying to move. It requires power and energy. So eventually we can apply the same thought process to them with some slight differences, of course, some major differences, to be honest. But I haven't really thought about where the next journey is as far as what vehicle it is. But what I am convicted to understand is how, a little bit of hint to what we're going to as Evolectric, but the first step in this whole process is hardware. We have to put hardware out there that does a job, right? And that job is moving people efficiently, effectively, and more economically, and more, with less emissions, right? Those are all the E's. That's a good one. I should write that one down. But essentially, if we can get those pieces of hardware out, the next level we have is a platform of learning that those hardware embodiments can do. So once you can tap into how that hardware is operating, we can start looking at human behavior and patterns and start optimizing for the benefit of humans all over the world. How can we use these more as tools than assets or things that we're really proud of, right? So it's a little bit of a loss. We're taking pride of ownership of those vehicles a little bit of away from us. But my opinion's always been like, yeah, I'm a car guy. I love cars, so to speak, from a aesthetic value, but what can that car do for me beyond being that aesthetic benefit? What is my general car able to enable in my exploration of my life? And is it a burden to my life, or can it be an enablement of that life? And can it be an enablement of my fellow neighbor? So the next 15 years for us are really going to be digging into how that hardware is really enabling people, and probably getting more tied into the data side. Like what trends are we seeing? What room is there for innovation? And how does it flip the whole ecosystem of transportation on its back, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And do you have any just kind of final thoughts or anything you'd like to leave the listeners with here today?
No, in general, appreciate the time and the ability to speak to the audience and to yourselves. And I'm always available if anybody wants to reach out and has any questions about what the industry looks like. I have a LinkedIn, obviously, but you can reach me through info@evolectricnow.com, my email. I'll do my best to respond. But I'm always keen to help, especially Long Beach alumni, move to that next level of their career journey, even if just a discussion. And if I can afford to have a lunch with you or a coffee, I'm a regular human too. I just have different experiences. I would love to sit down if I can make the time and actually engage with anybody who's looking for a career in this general space. So just thank you for your time, Lana and team.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll drop that email in the chat. It's info@Evolectric, right?
Evolectricnow.com. Info@evolectricnow.com.
Evolectric Now. Okay. Info@Evolectric.
Perfect. Yeah,
Perfect.
that's it.
Thanks, Ricky. Awesome. And yeah, definitely search for Bill Beverley on LinkedIn too and connect with him. And you can also email us at alumni@csulb.edu if you have any follow-up questions and want to be connected. So thank you all again. And thank you so much, Bill, for your time today. Thank you all for attending this edition of our 49er Industry Chats. This session was recorded and it will live on our website here on the screen, csulb.edu/alumni. It'll also be emailed to you as well, and to anyone who registered. You can also follow us on social media at CSULB alumni to learn about future chats like this. So thanks again. Have a great afternoon.